Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the memorial to honor and celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Charles T. Wilson. I'm Dr. Cheryl Champ, Superintendent of the Pelham Public Schools. That is a very humbling title given today's honoree. Thank you each for your presence here today to remember this superlative leader, educator, and human being. There are so many distinguished guests here that I cannot name them all, so please do forgive any oversights. I want to first begin by recognizing our current Board of Education members who are with us today, our trustees, John Brice and Leah Tabaz, and our former board members, who I also have seen around as we've assembled, Ms. Peggy Nicholson, Kathy Draper, Maggie Klein, and Will Kavanagh. I'd also like to thank our elected official Assemblywoman Amy Paulin for being with us. She is a great supporter to our schools through many superintendents and years. Thank you, Amy. And thank you to the administrators and staff, both past and present, who have come out to honor Dr. Wilson's legacy, many of whom were hired by or worked for him over his many years in the district. I also thank our community members who joined us today, who welcomed Dr. Wilson as an integral part of this town and who partnered with him to give our students and families the best education possible. Dr. Wilson even had the opportunity in his time in Pelham of being involved in so many community organizations and serving as president of the Rotary during that time. So we thank you for welcoming him and for being a part of the connection between the community and the schools. And finally, a huge thank you to those responsible for bringing today's event to fruition. I have to start first and foremost, the woman who this event would not be taking place if it were not for her, Miss Maria Caravellano, my trusted assistant in my office. Thank you also to Principal Lynn Sabia, Dr. Maria Thompson, Assistant Superintendent Rosemary Matthews, Scott Brown, a school counselor, Sally Tedesco, Administrative Office Assistant for PPS, and Alex Wolf, our Public Information Officer. These are all the members of the Dr. Wilson Memorial Committee who put today's event and a number of other activities together. Thank you for their efforts. And finally, thank you for our outstanding facility staff, our AV department, and Drs. Callahan and Mr. Scott, also Mr. Will Kavanagh, all of whom have made various aspects of today's event possible. We would not be here without your incredible talent and willing to help out, so thank you. Dr. Wilson has left his fingerprints on pretty much every aspect of our district, from personnel, programs, and curriculum to school spirit and traditions. This week actually is Spirit Week, leading up to the first ever Dr. Charles T. Wilson, officially named, Olympics on June 10th, which has been officially declared Dr. Charles T. Wilson Day for the Pelham Public Schools. Generations of students have benefited from the seeds he planted long ago. When I began in the district 5 years ago, I got a note from Dr. Wilson welcoming me, expressing his love for Pelham, and wishing me every success in my endeavors. When I finally met him, I knew right away that he was a rare gem of a human being and someone I would aspire to emulate. After my first year in the district, our beloved district clerk, who you will hear from today, decided that after 22 years and 4 superintendents, it was time to retire. At her retirement party, I had the chance for the first time to be not only with Dr. Wilson, but all of the then living former superintendents from the Pelham Public Schools, including Dr. Lauro and Dr. Girizzo. That's when I really understood the amazing legacy of leadership that I had been invited to become a part of. I am forever thankful for Charlie's encouragement and for the incredible personal and professional support he and both of my immediate predecessors have provided to me in these last years. I'm honored now to introduce one of them as our first speaker. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dennis Lauro.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been thinking about, I knew this was going to happen. I've been thinking about what I would say today for several weeks. It is difficult to find just one thing that you can recall about such a wonderful human being as Charles Wilson. To me, he was a wonderful leader, a great colleague, a mentor, and most of all, a friend. He will be missed by so many because he lived his life always caring about other people. During my superintendency, I coined the phrase, always put students first. But that really wasn't mine alone. It was Charlie that used the phrase to help guide his every step as superintendent. Still today, the district's goal reflects it, inspiring a standard of excellence for all students. I might add, it certainly did him well to guide his every step. One only must look at his accomplishments during his tenure as superintendent. I came across a quote one morning while doing what I do each day, try to find something to help me guide me through my daily life. Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's youngest prime minister in 150 years, when she was sworn in at 37 years old, said, "Leadership is not about necessarily being the loudest in the room." I immediately thought of Charlie, who so many times led quietly but effectively. He was always well liked and respected. It was his temperament, his belief in the good that human beings possess that also helped him achieve these goals. Leaders make the most impact when they listen to people around them, try to find common ground, and lift up those who need it most. Let us today remember a man who left an impact on the many generations to follow his leadership, because during his time, he was able to pass a major bond that brought about the school buildings well into the 21st century. It was through his leadership, his ability to work with everyone, his collaborations, that helped make Pelham what it continues to be today, a top-notch school district in the state and the nation. One only needs to look at the middle school or the beautiful renovated high school spaces, the addition of the library at Colonial to realize some of the accomplishments of Charles Wilson. He has impacted the district and so many of us who followed him and continue to foster an atmosphere for all children to succeed. Lest we forget his program accomplishments like the Student Olympics, already mentioned, the Science Research Project, a restructuring of the high school guidance department, creation of language labs, additional AP courses, other college credit-bearing programs, support the development of the technology infrastructure that today we take for granted and just expect, as well as the creation of the Pelham Education Foundation. All these accomplishments and more made Pelham what it is today. I wish to express my deepest sympathies to his family, to Bill, his lifelong partner, and to all whom he touched. We can recall what a wonderful, kind, passionate human being that Charles Wilson was. We will miss him dearly and hope that he has found the resting place where he can watch over us as we continue the legacy he left behind. As we honor his memory today, I would like to announce the creation of the Charles T. Wilson Memorial Scholarship, which will be funded through contributions. It will be given annually to underserved seniors from Pelham Memorial High School. If you wish to contribute to this memorial, you can send your check to the Pelham Education Foundation, who will administer the scholarship annually and oversee the fund. Be sure to make a note that what the check is for, the scholarship. They asked me to say that to you. Again, I just can't believe we're here. And I had the opportunity, and I just want to say this, along with Mike Trombley, who's here as well, to go up to the funeral in Massachusetts. And I was glad we did it because there were Mary, I'm forgetting Mary's name. And there were several other people from here that also were up there. But I couldn't help myself, as you know, but I am. Everybody was talking about what a wonderful person he was as a family member and so on, and no one was mentioning his career as an educator. So I just decided to be spontaneous and got up there and said something, but I reminded him that there was a large Pelham community and all of his friends in New York that were with him that day. And everyone in his family really did appreciate it. So I just want to end by saying, I'm just glad we're here, and I really do appreciate the showing that you feel like I feel for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Laurel. Our next two speakers bring a depth of wisdom and service to the community and the district, and both have had the opportunity to work directly with Dr. Wilson as they led the district as trustees on the Board of Education. Please welcome current board trustee and former board president John Brice, followed by former board trustee and former vice president Will Kavanagh.
Good afternoon, everybody. I feel really honored to be up here sharing my thoughts with you today. So I'm channeling Dr. Wilson here, all handwritten, although not in pen. No technology. There are many people here who knew Dr. Wilson better than I did, I suspect. So I don't have as many funny anecdotes or stories to tell about Dr. Wilson. So I'm going to tell you about the Dr. Wilson that I knew and admired. Charlie was a builder, he was a creator, he was a visionary. He's created the school district that we have today. It's his legacy. How many people here were hired by Dr. Wilson? Show of hands. That's amazing. This is the legacy that he gave us, the legacy we still have today. He sought out the best and brightest. He and his partner in crime, Dennis, and always was looking to create the very best team that they could. And everything now that we are enjoying now was set up by Dr. Wilson and Dr. Laurel, and they set in motion all the wonderful programs that we have today. So some things have been added since his retirement, IBM, and FLES. But it was the people that he brought in and hired who established the need for those programs and brought them on board. So he's part of them all. He always encouraged his people to take positions of leadership, whether they were new hires or they were people that were here already. He pushed people and brought them up to the next level where they could make significant contributions. I think that was one of his greatest strengths. He recognized those people that could do that, and he gave them the license to do it. He was the instigator in charge for two major bond projects. Dennis touched on this. And between them, they created a whole new middle school. They created a completely reconstructed high school, which we're still working on. And he created a major extension to Colonial, which was bursting at the seams at the time. This was a part of a sort of a can-do attitude that Charlie had, and that permeates down to today. It's that spirit of wanting to create the best environment for our kids to learn in that prompted a new hutch and prompted all the other improvements that we're currently working on, and still including fixing the high school. And so I think that's another part of his legacy. I work in other school districts, and most of the time they do as little as possible to maintain their facilities. But in Pelham, we have a different point of view about such things. We want to create that environment that will help our children learn best. And he was the spirit that created that. One of my most difficult moments as a board president was when Charlie asked me if he could have a private word with me before our executive session. I can't even remember what time of year it was, but it must have been spring. And so he went into the room, in the new middle school conference room, and he said, "I've been considering this for a long time, but I think I'm going to retire." And he let that go for a minute. Thanks. I can hold it with one hand. He let that settle in for a minute, but he must have seen the look of abject panic on my face. Because the next thing he says was, "Don't worry, I think I have a solution." And so he helped us through that transition. And I think, as I said before, the legacy of all the things he did at the school district have stayed with us, and I think it's being carried forward, and I hope that it continues to be carried forward in these very challenging times. So thank you very much for coming, and it's so wonderful to see a lot of you, who I haven't seen in a long time. So it's a little bit of a get together. So thank you very much.
I'm delighted to be here today among so many friends to celebrate Charlie Wilson's legacy. And it's quite a legacy. I consider it a special privilege to be asked to speak about somebody who I so admire and respect. My name's Will Kavanagh. I spent 12 years on the school board, 2002 to 2014. Wonderful years, worked with Charlie, Dennis, Peter. It was a great experience. Others are going to talk about Charlie's accomplishments, have and will. I'm going to talk about his biggest challenge. And the most important obstacle he had to face when he became superintendent. When he became superintendent, Pelham was an excellent school district. The fundamentals were strong. We faced a number of challenges. Expanding school population, aging infrastructure, and a demanding parent population. But that's old hat for school superintendents. They deal with that all the time. And that's par for the course, as his successors can well attest. But Dr. Wilson also had to deal with another problem, a more fundamental existential issue. There was a significant no voting bloc in the community who would not support any initiative to do anything ever. This came at a time where we needed to do things. We needed to move forward, and we needed to progress. In the face of this challenge, Dr. Wilson was the right person at the right time. When he became superintendent, he drew on his years of experience in the Pelham community. He knew the Pelham community as well and probably better than almost everyone. Its idiosyncrasies, and there are a lot of idiosyncrasies in Pelham. His boundless energy, his unflinching commitment, and his endless optimism were contagious. Charlie listened. He was open-minded, he was responsive, and he was respectful. Under Charlie's leadership, the district attained the strong confidence of those members of the community who had been skeptical. The foundation of Pelham community confidence that Charlie Wilson secured forms a bedrock for everything that his successors have built upon, and that we still enjoy today. And the Pelham Weekly was there to chronicle it all. It was a very important element in our success. Everybody knew what was going on, everybody knew the issues, could talk about them, and could debate them in public. As everybody in the audience knows, Charlie didn't do this alone. He had a top-flight senior administrative team working hand-in-hand with Dennis and Stevie and Ronnie Stoll. And we had a strong faculty, staff, and administration that he recruited. Second to none. That's probably Charlie's most important legacy. He was very proud of his team. He always spoke about them. Maybe not to your face all the time, but he was always very proud of everyone. As a former school board member, I should add that I always felt very proud and appreciative of the strong, positive working relationship between the Pelham unions and the central administration. Pelham was very unique in that regard, but it gave me the sense that we were all working on the same page. We're all working for a common goal, even when we had disagreements. Thank you for that commitment. Let me close by citing two examples from the Middle School Bond Initiative that tell a lot about Charlie Wilson. As you may recall, the first bond proposal went down to a crushing defeat. It was a crushing blow, and no one was quite sure why it lost. No one worked harder on it than Charlie. His comment that night is very telling. Maybe our proposal was too ambitious, he said, almost under his breath, and almost to no one. But that was his perspective. He made that comment without rancor or bitterness. It reflected his intent to roll up his sleeves, get started again, and his belief that the Pelham community would be won over. As we all know, the second time around, the bond proposal was approved by an overwhelming majority. Dr. Wilson's mom died right during the second bond proposal and shortly before the second vote. It was a key time. The evening of his mom's funeral, there was an important public meeting on the bond proposal, and an important constituency was going to be there. Dr. Wilson went to the funeral that morning, made the 7-hour drive back from Maine, and led the meeting that night. All I can say is, wow, that's dedication. These two instances say a lot about Dr. Wilson, his outlook on life, his character, and his remarkable dedication and commitment to the Pelham community and to the kids. And finally, speaking about the kids, as Dr. Lauro said, Dennis was always focused on the kids. The kids came first. Nothing gave him greater pleasure than watching the kids in action and honoring their achievements in the classroom, on the stage, and on the playing fields. Charlie was the #1 Pelican fan, and Charlie bled Pelican blue and gold all his life. Charlie, I'm grateful to be able to call you my friend, and want to extend the gratefulness of the Pelham community for all you did for Pelham. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John and Will. Nancy Fisher, a former board president and trustee who could not be with us today, sent a few words to share as well. Nancy writes, although I could not be there today, I wanted to say a few words about Charlie. I was president of the board when it came time to find a new superintendent. The board decided we needed to do a nationwide search for the perfect candidate, which we did, and we came up with Charlie, Pelham's own. After serving with him for most of my 9 years on the board, it was apparent that he was the perfect candidate, a true educator whose knowledge, character, demeanor, and professionalism fit the bill. Charlie was the most gracious person, respected by his peers as well as the entire Pelham community. Pelham schools flourished under Charlie's leadership, and we were lucky to have him. So thank you, Nancy. And now I'm pleased to welcome another legend of the Pelham Public Schools, former principal of both Colonial and Pelham Middle School, Mr. Joe Longobardi.
Wow, no one's called me a legend in a long time. Thank you, Dr. Chamblin. Good afternoon. I'm very saddened, but very honored to be here today to participate in this celebration of life of Charlie Wilson. I was privileged to know Charlie as both a friend, there he goes. I was privileged to know Charlie as both a friend and colleague for almost 50 years. When I was putting my thoughts together in preparation for the service, I thought about the many experiences I had with Charlie. I thought about his incredible skills and his accomplishments, and you've heard many of them so far. during his wonderful career here in Pelham. As you can imagine, there were many of them, and we would probably need to stay here late into the night if we were going to speak to all of them. But after thinking about what I would like to share, I was on my walk this morning, and I went back to my earliest memories of Charlie. It's funny, there are days I can't remember the names of my grandchildren, but I can easily recall the details of a Board of Ed meeting, or a teacher or a parent that I knew 40 years ago. Back in the early 70s, when I was a young teacher at Hutchinson, and Charlie was a high school history teacher, we would have these Friday afternoon basketball games at the high school gym. You remember those, Mr. Tobin? Now, I wasn't much of a basketball player, but Charlie, yeah, I know, you knew you'd agree, but Charlie was a true standout on the court. He was good. As the kids would say, he had game. And when I think about those games and the multitude of skills Charlie demonstrated on the court, it is now easy to see how he applied those same skills to his work as a brilliant educational leader, a fair and compassionate supervisor, and just an exceptional human being. As both a superintendent and on the hardwood, Charlie was a real team player. He always involved all the stakeholders in the decision-making process and valued their input, just as he involved his teammates during those pickup games. He played with great determination, was all business on the court, but always took time to pick up his teammates and offer encouragement. He was the first to offer a handshake or kudos to a teammate or opposing player for a great play. Does that sound familiar? Now, Charlie could score, but he was an excellent defender. He attended to every detail on the court and was an excellent rebounder, always giving his teammates a second opportunity for a bucket. Kind of the same approach he took with all of us, students, parents, teachers, administrators. When something didn't go right the first time, or we made a mistake, we needed a second chance, and he gave it to us. And most of the times we came through. Charlie really knew on the court how to work the boards, a skill that I'm sure all your former board members here today would agree with. Charlie was also multi-talented. I'm not sure that everyone knows what a great stand-up comedian he was. He loved to roast his colleagues and in turn enjoyed being roasted. He made it a tradition at our administrative get-togethers to roast every retiring or departing principal or central office administrator. I also found out that he also had a pretty good singing voice. I'll never forget him singing a solo farewell song to the middle school graduates at their graduation ceremony prior to his retirement. Mind you, there were 1,400 people in the gym that night. I had no idea that Charlie was going to sing. He asked me if he could have the microphone, and without any accompaniment, he sang a beautiful song. I don't remember the name of it, but it was good. It was pretty good. But most importantly, how courageous was that? I realize now why Charlie always returned to Pelham. After seizing an opportunity to try something different and broad in his career, he would come back. I would often tease him about how many times he left and subsequently returned, likening him to the infamous Billy Martin, former manager of the Yankees. We always enjoyed a good laugh together. Charlie returned because Pelham was special to him. He was here as a young man and grew here as a teacher, a counselor, a director, an assistant superintendent, and then finally superintendent of schools. He always spoke so fondly of the student body and the community at large. He admired, supported, and respected the teachers. He was a PMHS teacher, and he never forgot that. He remembered his roots. He respected the entire staff. I remember, as I walked through the halls today, it brought back recollections of this also. I remember a lunch monitor once telling me that he was so impressed that Dr. Wilson knew his name and always took the time to talk to him about the Yankees, even though he himself was a Red Sox fan. He genuinely respected the opinions of all the constituents, even during contentious and difficult times. I don't ever remember him speaking poorly of anyone. He respected and valued the traditions and the culture of this community. That was Charlie Wilson. He loved Pelham. And Charlie, I'm here to tell you, Pelham loved you, and we always will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Next, please welcome former English teacher, theater director, and advisor of Sock and Buskin, Mr. John Orefice.
Thank you, Dr. Chamblin.
Raise your hand if your life was forever changed by a phone call from Charlie Wilson. Oh, what a perfect setting. This is where he belonged. The mighty memorial building, now apparently undergoing a facelift, which heralds honoring the ideals for which he fought. And this spot, where every spring the cherry trees and their blossoms remind us that beauty itself is such because it is temporary. Goodness knows he made many entrances and exits throughout his career, but he grew and adapted to the many roles he played, but always left his measure of grace on the children and teachers of Pelham. Teachers revered him. Maybe it was the way he knew everybody's name, the power of acknowledgement. Maybe it was his wit, his modesty, or how he used the word honestly at the beginning of each sentence and meant it, or how he spent as much time listening as he did speaking. For me, it was the little things like his smile at the School Olympics, playing basketball after school on Fridays, his tributes to retiring teachers, or those thank you notes written in that distinctive, primitive handwriting. A tremendous supporter of the arts, I don't think he missed a Sock and Buskin show. In fact, he even played a role on stage in our fundraising production of 1776, where he delivered a tour de force cameo as Ben Franklin's portrait painter. Charlie's moment, perfectly costumed in colonial attire by Tom Beck, got one of the biggest laughs in the show and exit applause. I first knew Charlie back in the 70s through the best guidance counselor a Tuckahoe Tiger ever had, Bill Sarmento. After graduating, I volunteered at Tuckahoe, and in 1977, we literally cloned, if not stole, the senior talent show that Charlie had produced for Pelham, scenery and all. The show was a brilliant mixture of song and Wilson wit called This Is Your Life, Father Time. Father Time would be visited by such dignitaries as Mother Nature, Julius Caesar, Joan of Arc, Da Vinci, Cleopatra, Lincoln, Howard Cosell, and Katharine Hepburn. The finale had the entire senior class, led by Annie Warbucks, singing a medley of Yesterday, It's Today, and Tomorrow. In those yesterdays, we Pelham teachers felt blessed to have Charlie looking after us. We felt insulated from the slings and arrows of controversy and appreciated his calm approach to two-sided issues, always asking the question, why can't we have both? To be his colleague was to be his friend. And I'm proud that he made that telephone call in 1979, and prouder still of Pelham in 2022 for recognizing the nobility of this gentleman educator and carrying forward his vision. You're a good man, Charlie Wilson. Thank you for being there yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Thank you so much, John. Our final speaker today doesn't enjoy the spotlight, but she was the strong woman standing behind and supporting every superintendent for 22 years. Please welcome my trusted former assistant and former secretary to the superintendent and district clerk, Stevie Pollock.
It's true, I don't enjoy the spotlight. I think my head will know that I'm reading words, but my mouth won't know what's coming out, so just hang in there with me. Those are very tough acts to follow, folks. But I wanted to say hello to everyone. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Stevie Pollock, and I've been retired for a while now, but as Cheryl said, I was district clerk and superintendent for 22 years. For 12 of those years, I worked for and with Dr. Wilson. But I was also given a third title by Dr. Wilson. It was an honorary title, Head Angel in Charge. You see, he referred to the Central Office Administrative Support Staff as Charlie's Angels. As the head angel in charge, it was my privilege, along with the other angels, to assist Dr. Wilson as he set out to prepare for and complete each day's tasks. Inevitably, his approach to the day was always a positive one, even though he knew that at times there would be challenges. Charlie was a person who celebrated the who, what, when, where, and why about life. Life in Pelham, and in the Pelham schools particularly. A Charlie Wilson style celebration might be large or small and might involve a timely and supportive phone call, a good laugh, a kind word or compliment, a handwritten note or card. John, where are you? And I believe he felt that it was the old-fashioned, more personal way to connect to people, but I think we all know that Charlie was technologically challenged. A birthday cake, a bagels and coffee breakfast, an order-in Chinese lunch, cookies, any kind for any reason. The flipping of burgers and hot dogs on the superintendent's conference day for lunch at the beginning of a new school year. By the way, his partner in crime for this was always Anthony Mandelli. A bouquet of flowers for birthdays or the successful passing of a budget or bond. Or, finally, after all our years of working together, the celebration that surprised me the most. Charlie bursting into song. It was at the teacher's end of the year party just before Charlie retired. You see, typically Dr. Wilson would speak to the assembly of school board members, teachers, administrators, retirees, and support staff with a few kind words to say thank you for the current school year and encourage everyone for the school year to come. This time, however, he was also saying farewell. As he ended his address, I was startled to hear the start of a vaguely familiar tune coming from the podium. My Kind of Town. You know the Frank Sinatra song? But instead of Chicago Is, Dr. Wilson was substituting Pelham Is. I was watching Charlie sing, but the mellow voice I was hearing was in the style of Matt Monroe, the English baritone who sang the James Bond theme song From Russia with Love. I was dumbfounded. He was amazing. After knowing him for so many years, how could I have missed this talent? It was memorable for me and for a lot of others, I'm sure. Charlie appreciated Pelham, and today we're here, I'm here, to say how much I appreciated Charlie. So here goes. Charlie, if you can hear me, as your head angel in charge, I'll always be grateful for the years that we worked together. I'll miss you. And I'm so glad that I could call you my friend. You were a remarkable human being, and no doubt now you will be an awesome angel. Thank you.
Thank you, Stevie. And to all of our distinguished speakers, your thoughtful words and memories have brought true honor to Dr. Wilson today. He would be so proud. I again thank everyone who came today to celebrate Dr. Wilson's life and legacy. After our concluding anthem, I invite you all to stay and enjoy the reception in the shade as we reminisce and continue to honor Dr. Wilson through our fellowship, our connection to one another, and the Pelham Public Schools. And we'll leave the microphone open in case anyone wants to, after our anthem, also come up with any impromptu comments as well. So thank you very much, and with that, we will turn it to our final anthem.